one of the things he said is he's still looking for his best shot, you know, and that really has resonated with me and sat with me. Is like, don't ever be satisfied with something and be like, okay, I'm good there. I've done that. I haven't arrived yet.
Yeah, being in a place where you're like willing to grow, have that attitude of humility of like, I haven't made it yet, and that's okay. It makes me so much more excited to go out during my day knowing that I could get a better shot than the one I took yesterday. Welcome to Bird Burger, where we talk about all things wildlife and nature oriented. In wildlife photography, our culture has become so saturated with images. In a society in which camera gear is easier to use than ever, and in a society in which it's easier to share photos than ever via social media, it can be difficult to stand out from the crowd. So today I'm joined here by good friend and amazing wildlife photographer, Jamin Hunter Taylor. Jamin, how you doing?
Hey man, doing really great. How are you?
Good. It's been a long time coming trying to have you on this podcast. I remember 2 months ago, before Bird Burger was out at all, you were the first person I asked literally to be on this podcast, and you were like, yep, let's do it. I'm all in. So I'm excited that you're here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's good to finally talk and connect. So,
dude, you have just the most amazing photography. In my brain, there's like these different levels of photos, right? You have photos that are kind of clear and show the subject, kind of show the species that you're shooting, but don't really offer too much beyond that. You have then like kind of images that are really good and technically sound, you know, do a lot of things well and look good, but don't really like have that kind of pop and eye-catching intrigue to them. But your images, like when I look at them almost every time, I'm just amazed, and I just see an image that reaches out of the screen, grabs my attention and pulls me in, and really feels kind of like fine art. So to start off, can you just share with us a little bit about your photographic process, all the way from the planning to the editing and everything in between, to get an image that is kind of this high of quality?
Yeah, well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's been a lot of work. You know, of course, when I started out, I was using like this Canon SX50, which is this like little point and shoot.
Yeah.
And like my main goal was just like take a picture of the bird.
Yeah.
You know, because birding was my entry into photography. But really, like, to tell the whole story, like, we have to go back to like when I was a kid, you know, and I've been an artist since I can remember. So picking up a pencil and crayons and colored pencils and drawing and making dinosaurs with Play-Doh and, you know, just all kinds of creative stuff that I was doing when I was a kid. And all through that, you know, I've been drawing and all that kind of stuff. And before I got into photography, I was doing paintings on canvas using like mixed media and that kind of stuff. So I've always been very artistic in that way. And so I got really interested in birds in like 2015, I would say. Once I got a camera, you know, the SX50, and started playing with that, I was like, oh man, this is so fun, you know. But it just kind of wet my whistle for something better, because that was like not a great camera to use, and it was difficult, and I got frustrated with like some of the use of it, and so I graduated to a Nikon D5100 that a buddy of mine was selling, and that was it. And so once I started that, it was just like I was shooting like every day I could, you know, getting out like every opportunity that I could. I was going out, and you know, you look back on those first images and it's like, ew.
Yeah.
But you know, you have to start somewhere. You know, everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Those first ones.
Yep.
You know, they're not great.
It's relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. I've just worked hard at it. You know, it's just something that, and of course, I think once I started to realize that, you know, that photography could be a form of art, then, you know, that kind of triggered for me and started changing my work considerably. Yeah,
you kind of talk about this switch from kind of realizing, it sounds like, that you have like this ability to go out and capture a subject, capture a bird or whatever it may be, but there's a switch from that to realizing that your photography can be art. And it's not just simply something you can do to go out and capture the way that something looks, but it's something you can actually use as art to kind of like create a scene, create an emotion. And I think that that's really cool. A project that stands out to me is your recent doll sheet project, in which you got just these incredible, stunning images that just feel like fine art images rather than documentarian. You have a really cool video on it, which I'll link below in the description. But yeah, every shot that you take feels like there's purpose and intention and meaning with it, rather than just something that you kind of randomly like snapped as you're walking by. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference in your perspective between what makes this kind of documentary, for lack of a better word, type of image versus a fine art type of image?
Yeah. Well, like I said before, thanks for, by the way, that was such a blast with those sheep. It was just like
an
amazing day up there with them, and the wind was blowing and it was like cold and
brutal. Yeah.
But, I started, I think the switch for me happened when I started, there's guys like Ray Hennessy and Khurram Khan, and I was looking at these guys' work and seeing the artistic value in it, really kind of seeing it for the art that it was, instead of just like a picture of a bird, and so that triggered for me like, ooh, I can do different stuff, I can really like take this and apply my artistic brain to it and try to make this, this is my art now. And so when I'm out there, before I was just trying to get the shot, trying to get the photo, and so now I think my creative mind has switched to, when I'm taking the shot, I'm thinking about how does this look in the frame, is this going to look better if I flip the camera up? Portrait orientation, is there more to it? Is there things that I can use as like foreground, or how does the background look? Do I need to take a few steps over to get a cleaner background, or is there a tree or something? In fact, there's one of those images from the doll sheep outing where there was this spruce tree behind this ram and this ewe. This ram came up right behind this ewe and was like sniffing her out, right?
Yeah.
and there's this spruce tree right behind him, and I just moved over a couple of steps to get this spruce tree just perfectly balanced with the sheep, and like little things like that where you're thinking about background, you're thinking about how does this look in the frame. I'm not just Scott Keys and Ray Hennessy actually had a podcast a while back, or a video series, and they were talking about backgrounds, right, for wildlife photography. And I think it was Scott that mentioned that you have to like see through your subject, and like that hit me, and that was impactful for me. Yeah, because you have to be aware of not just what you're taking a photo of, but be aware of the background. Like, does that look good with a snarl of trees behind it, or do you need to take a few steps or more, over to the right or to the left? Yeah, and will that open up the background more, to pop out your subject, So it's these little things like that where you think about your whole surroundings and not just, taking that shot.
The first thing that comes to mind.
Like, yeah. And I think that's just your growth as a photographer, because it was for me. I know a lot of people that, they're starting out and they just want to get the shot, and that's totally okay. I get that.
Yeah.
I was there for sure. And sometimes that's all I get too,
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, like, if you see something rare or you've never seen before, and
you panic and
like, you're not thinking about too much of it. You're trying to make with it what you can, but like, it's those moments though, I think, where you have a little bit more time and can really think about your composition and your shots, those are the times that it's really special, and when you can really spend time making something. So I think it's just the thought process of putting more thought and intention into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. I mean, when I got into wildlife photography, I kind of got into birding at the same time. And so for me, I was like discovering all these new species, and like anytime a bird would, come up that's new, I'm just trying to snap any picture that I can of it, the closest possible picture or whatever it can be, thinking very little about, kind of like, I guess the art of the image, but rather more just like, can I capture this shot or not? So that's definitely relatable and can relate to. And I've found that over the years, I've become a lot more in tune with like, how do I make this image feel like a piece of art rather than, just like that documentary piece. And even the Vermilion Flycatcher video that I recently filmed on my main channel, that was a really fun example for me of like just being able to really concentrate. I've seen it for 3 years in a row. I've learned about it so much. It's a rarity up at a lake we have here. And finally just getting to a place where like, I have this vision of what I want to capture. Now let me make this happen. And I'm going to forget about every other type of shot, and I'm just going to focus on this one. And it was a really fun process of like planning out and executing that kind of image. And I love that, you brought up Ray Hennessy. I mean, Ray Hennessy is just an amazing artist. Like he is, like you said, like he's just such a pinnacle example of like, how can I creatively capture this image and do it uniquely? And so often I feel myself just amazed by his quality of images, and we got to be able to bring him on. I've been trying to bring him on, but he's just so swamped and so busy. So we got to work together to convince him to come on.
That guy's everywhere. He's so busy. It's crazy.
Insane. But I love what you shared in actually a podcast you had with Ray Hennessy. Like, gosh, I mean, this was like probably 6 months ago when I was going through my surgery, or 4 months ago, whenever that was. You talked about this idea that I really liked and stuck with me, this concept of like a scroll stopper. Like when you're scrolling through your Instagram, because we all do that nowadays, we're scrolling through and we're seeing hundreds, if not thousands of images at a time. You talked about this idea of a scroll stopper where something like makes you kind of pause and like, wow, that's not just a good photo, but that's something that like grabs me and pulls me in, and I'm forced to stop my scroll because of it. And I really like that idea. For you, can you talk a little bit maybe about what this means or what makes something a scroll stopper in your eyes?
It's hard sometimes, I think, to pinpoint like what exactly makes a scroll stopper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a nebulous term, and just that you can't necessarily define it all the time. You know, it's like, you know it when you see it kind of thing. But I think one of the attributes of that is something that's different that I haven't seen before. You know what I mean?
Unique.
It could be, it could be just something that's been photographed in a way that I've never seen it. I'm trying to think of a recent example where I saw something that I hadn't. I saw this really interesting photo of a great gray owl, and you've seen a ton of great gray owl photos. Everything from like perched on a limb to like flying, and But this one was really interesting. It was like more up, and there's like these trees and the light on. It was just like this. It was like this interesting view. It was something different. And then another example is this one where this guy had put like a wide angle lens, like pointed straight up. And there's this, I think it's a European jay or a Russian jay or something that's like flying overhead, and like it flashes, so it catches the underside of the bird, and so you see these trees. It's this amazing photo. It's really, really good. They're different. There's something different to them. They're, maybe the photographers put more time and energy and thought into the creative process of them, or just got lucky. I think there's plenty of both. But, one of the things that can help make a photo really unique and kind of bring out that scroll stopper
feeling,
feeling is this concept called that's called piece de resistance, and it's kind of a French term which basically means like it's unique. There's something about that photo that brings your eye in that's unique. It could be like a red berry in a bill, in the bird's bill, or if it was a close-up of a cormorant and you see that blue eye, it's that one thing that stands out that makes it different, and so I like that concept. and I'm probably butchering because I don't speak French, but
No, yeah, that's awesome.
but yeah, that concept is really cool. It was taught to me by a seasoned photographer who does a lot of workshops and instruction, that kind of thing. And so I appreciate learning a little bit more, because it helps me as a photographer.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think thinking about that in regards to like in wildlife photography, you have these ideas of rules, right? So anything from stuff like rule of thirds all the way to 90-degree engagement rule or walking room or things like that. There's so many rules that we think about in wildlife photography of how to compose an image or edit an image, things like that. But you're also talking about this idea of like a scroll stopper being something unique that's never been done before. In this high level fine art photography, what do you think, or kind of what's your perspective on these different types of rules? And like when to use them and how do you break these rules? I don't know. Do you have any kind of thoughts revolving around that topic?
When I do some of my workshops, I've got one that I call Bird Photography Boot Camp, and it's really tailored for people who are just getting started. They've got a camera and ready to get out there, and it's kind of like a kickstart into out the door doing better than you would if you didn't have any kind of knowledge or anything.
Yep.
So in this workshop, I talk about these rules, and actually I like the expression that they're tools rather than rules, because again, like rules can be broken, right? And should be broken in some cases, but at least in photography, but if you think about them as tools, just like your camera, just like your lens, these tools for composition are just there to help you make your art, make a photo. And so they help you with composition, and like the rule of thirds is a really good one, and it's a great place to start, like compose with the rule of thirds in mind. That's a one that a lot of people adhere to, but there's also the golden ratio. You've got a whole bunch of other ones, and you're kind of thinking about that in post process too. How does this look best? Do I need to crop this? How should I crop it? There are times when I took something horizontal and it actually looks better vertical, so I'll crop it with portrait orientation, and it comes out much better. So yeah, those are tools that you can use, and they should be broken when it's appropriate to break them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that perspective of switching it from this idea of like rules to tools, because tools are so much more valued. There's a lot more like thought when you're using a tool rather than like when you're just following a rule, and you can choose to use that tool, right? Like you can choose to use this hammer, or you can choose to use a screw gun, or whatever your tool is that you're using. You're not forced to do it, but it's often very helpful if you do it. But it also makes you think about like, oh, maybe this isn't the best tool for this scenario, rather than if you're just following the rules, So I love that perspective, and I love you sharing that. It makes me think about last week in the podcast that I had with Christopher Smith. We talked a lot about the idea of how our culture is changing, shifting, attention span is decreasing dramatically as opposed to a couple, years ago. Like, I mean, even I feel like 10, 15, well, maybe not 10 years ago, but like 15, 20 years ago, the primary way that you would view wildlife photography images is like walking into a museum, an art gallery, something like that, and you have a handful of selected curated images that are surrounding you, and you're kind of forced to sit there and digest them for a second rather than just scrolling by them. But now we're scrolling through thousands, we're scrolling through hundreds a day. It becomes so much harder to kind of make an image that stands out, make an image that looks good because of that, even just the size of the images that we're looking at. With how our culture has changed and our attention spans have changed so dramatically, how do you see kind of wildlife photography aesthetics morphing with our culture? Do you see that? Do you feel like there's ways that you can approach that well, or curate your images well to be effectively presented? Or what are your kind of thoughts on that whole situation?
Well, that's an interesting question. Things have changed so much since film days, I just think of some of the photographers who started out in film, and how difficult that was, and how costly and time consuming getting into
Yeah,
photography
gosh.
was. There was such a small niche of people who were doing that, because the learning curve was so steep. You've got to like go out with this film, and then you couldn't look at your photo right away. You had to wait like 2 weeks to get it developed, and then you get it back, and you're like, oh, I was underexposed there or whatever, and so like can you imagine that learning curve, and the cost of like developing the film, and nowadays, especially with mirrorless cameras, where like you can see live view of what your exposure is, it's made getting into photography so much easier. The learning curve has just been almost flattened out because of the ease of getting into it. You have this marketplace or just community, that's saturated with photos. I mean, I can look through my Instagram feed and see tons of people, and then if you click on the little magnifying glass, like you can find a bunch more that you've never seen before, and you're like, oh man, this guy's really good, or this gal's really good, I'm gonna follow her. And so especially in the way that our culture is now, where it's such a on demand, people are scrolling through their phones, it's so easy to see something. We talked about a scroll stopper, and like that's a way of standing out from the crowd and whatever. But at the end of the day, I go back to something my buddy Rob Tapana, a good buddy of mine, said, and he, years ago when I started shooting with him and we became friends, he said, shoot for you, shoot to make you happy and make images that you like. And that really stuck with me, because I think if we get in the mentality of trying to get followers on Instagram or whatever it is, whatever social media we're putting up our work, I think we're going to be let down eventually, if people don't like our work, or if it's not performing as expected, or you're not getting as many followers or whatever. It's like, shoot for you, make sure that at the end of the day, you're happy with your work, because that's all that really matters. Do it to please yourself. And if other people like it, then that's a bonus, and that's a really great thing. Shoot, we all want people to, admire and recognize the work that we've done here. But I think the best advice is what he gave me, is just shoot for you, make sure you're happy with it. And so, going back to my artistic mind, like I'm doing this for my own creativity. For me, it's like a lot of times it's a stress reliever, or it's just a way to get out and get away and have that peace of like being out there in nature, and just getting away from it all, the chaos of sometimes that life brings, and being able to like be creative.
Yeah, man, that is so relatable. Not many wildlife photographers do YouTube, so this is probably not maybe a super relatable story to a lot of people. But man, like on YouTube, that one, how it shows you the 1 out of 10 how your video is ranked compared to your last 10 videos. I don't know if you ever checked that, but man, that thing, I am just constantly like trying to get that little fireworks like confetti bubble that goes off when you get the 1 out of 10. And and it can be hard for me sometimes. Like I love the content that I get to create, so it's not like my happiness comes from how much that video is loved by the public, but there's still like an aspect of that in which I can relate, and I'm like, oh man, like people aren't liking it as much. I wish they liked it as much. And that wouldn't stop me. Like if like, all my stuff was just not performing well publicly, it wouldn't stop me, because I love what I get to do. But at the same time, I do feel that pressure and that realness of like, man, I want this to be like publicly accepted. And I have to remind myself sometimes, if I'm getting like a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10 video, I had to remind myself like, hey, you created this, and this was the best that you could have done with the tools you were given at this moment that you were given. You loved this process of getting to film this video and getting to capture these images, and that should be enough. And at the end of the day, if that's enough, then I'll be able to just thrive so much more as wildlife photographers. So I really love that, what you were sharing about that. When we first launched this channel, I released a video compiling a bunch of amazing photographers in which I asked them to share their single most important thing that they've discovered in kind of their success in wildlife photography or whatever it may be. Fun fact, you were actually meant to be in that video, but you had some stuff come up in life and you actually weren't able to submit it in time for me to get the edit done. But if you had to answer that question now for everyone who's watching it, what would you share with us?
Yeah, thanks for asking me that question, because I was so bummed that I didn't get my video in time. So, yeah, because this is an important one. So, yeah, pay attention. The most important thing in wildlife photography, hands down, is make sure that you have a full battery in your camera. Make sure you have an empty card in your camera before you go out. Before you go out.
Yeah.
So
kind of pointless without that. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. A buddy of mine, he had a cool bird come to his deck, and he got it all set up, and he got a new Z6 II for Christmas, and so he was excited to get out and try it. And so, he kept us out on the deck and shooting a bunch of photos. I think it was like pine grosbeaks or something that came in, and so he's out there for like 10 minutes or something. Then comes back in, he starts looking through them. And he realizes there's no images there because there's no card in there, and he was so bummed out.
Oh, the pain!
Yeah, but it's happened to me. It's happened to me. I've gone out and forgot to check my battery. If my battery was full and it's dead, and I didn't bring one with me, so it's like, what are you gonna do?
Oh yeah,
it's pointless. So yeah, I think I don't think anybody would argue with me that that's pretty important, but don't leave home without it.
Yeah, you really can't beat that at the end of the day, I guess. You can't even do wildlife photography without it. So I think this would be a fun way, as I was thinking about a good last question to kind of get all this wrapped up. I think a really cool last question would be, I know this is going to be a hard one, so a really difficult one to answer, but what's the best image you think you've taken so far, and why?
Yeah, it's a tough question, man. I'm happy with a lot of the photos I've taken. Of course, it goes back to that idea of shooting for myself and shooting to create images that I like. And I try to do that, regularly as far as like making stuff that I'm happy with. But, I always kind of go back to something my buddy Doug Lloyd, he's been a photographer for 40 plus years, and he was kind of really an inspiration to me when I got started. And he's actually responsible, I would say, largely for getting me into bird photography in the first place, because it's some of his photos that I saw in that Birds of Alaska Facebook group that triggered that, oh man, I want to make that, I want to make photos like that. And so one of the things he said is he's still looking for his best shot, and that really has resonated with me and sat with me, is like, don't ever be satisfied with something and be like, okay, I'm good there, I've done that, because truth is that I haven't arrived yet. I am not God's gift of photography.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. There's things that I still have to learn. There's ways in which I fall short and have to continue growing. And I think that if I stop growing, then I've failed as an artist, and part of the whole journey is just, the fun is in the journey, not in the destination. You know what I mean? Like, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, and this is on my website, but it's by Roger Reynolds, and it says, photography is a subject that you can never truly master and is one from which you will always be learning. And that sits so true with me. I've enjoyed so much the journey of photography and learning and growing and new gear, the excitement of new gear, and then learning how to use that, and like being in the field and trying new things. And one thing that Ray Hennessy actually taught me that has stuck with me really when I'm out in the field, is we were shooting this hawk owl, and this owl is just sitting in this tree off the side of the road in Denali National Park, and it's like you can't do much with it, because it's like kind of a white background, it's kind of an overcast sky, and this bird's just up at the top of this spruce tree. But Ray is looking around. He's looking through for things to shoot through, like other spruce trees to shoot through to get interesting, like foreground. And so I heard him say,
yeah,
what can I do differently? What can I do differently? He's looking around. And that was a moment of clarity for me, where I was like, wow, if I have the time, and if my subject is just going to sit there, or stand there or whatever, it's not one of those split second moments where I get a moment and then it's gone, which happens way too much, but in those times I need to be thinking, what can I do differently? Do I need to step to the right, to the left? Do I need to get down? Is there foreground elements that are around me that I can use to kind of soften up, if there's a background that's not working? Can I use something in the foreground to make that work, to blur that? So yeah, that's something that's really stuck with me. And so, yeah, I haven't arrived yet. And I'm having fun on the journey.
Yeah. Wow. That is so cool. Yeah. I love you kind of sharing that and talking about that. I think that, even not to dive like too much into that, 'cause it's kind of a tangent, but like, neurologically, like with with just the way that we go through life and how we kind of our happiness levels and our levels of contentment and satisfaction, so much like as you're going through that journey, it's so much more valuable and so much more life-giving than if you feel like you're in this place of like you've arrived, you made it, there's not much more for you. Because like scientifically, as you're growing and you're reaching and you're achieving goals and getting better and you feel like you're doing better and better, you're releasing, levels of dopamine into your brain. But once you hit that top and you hit that peak, they found, so often with like, whether that's high level athletes or, other people who have reached, the top of their careers or things like that. There's a lot of, varying levels, but levels of depression that come after that, because you kind of like feel like, okay, there's not much that's next, Yep. And being in a place where you're like, willing to grow and willing to know that like or have that attitude of humility of like, I haven't made it yet, and that's okay. It makes me so much more excited to go out during my day knowing that I could get a better shot than the one I took yesterday or last month. And not only does that make me happy and satisfied, but that actually also makes me a better wildlife photographer, which is so cool. I feel like you can recognize that difference when you see a wildlife photographer who's kind of just sat there and's gotten comfortable with taking the same image time after time, versus someone who's like, how can I grow? How can I switch it up? How can I become creative? And I know for myself that in my journey, when I started out, I kind of thought I had a lot of things together. I thought I was pretty good. Wasn't much room to grow. Now looking back on it, I'm like, oh man, that's definitely not the best that I had. But now I've come to such a better place of like knowing that there's so much room for growth in myself, and allowing that space. And now I feel like as I see my images just month after month, I feel like I've grown and I've progressed and I've gotten better and better. So I love you sharing that. I think that's just some gold stuff. So really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, it's good wisdom that if you can listen to, mentors or, just people that'll speak into your life and share things and take away things and really apply it, not just listen to it, but also take it to heart, and just hearing, some of my friends talk and them sharing with me some of the things that, especially my friend Doug is, like I said, been doing it for like 40 years. It's like, I'm gonna listen to what you have to say. You've proven to me that your success in this venue of life, in this particular discipline, that you know what you're doing. So
there's wisdom there.
Yep, I'm gonna pay attention to the wisdom that he offers for sure.
That's great. That's cool, dude. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that, man. Thank you for being on. Again, you just have the most amazing work, and it's just been such an honor to have you on, getting to share and hear your perspective about, you know, how you do your images, how you kind of see that, and I guess the whole journey of where you are and how you've kind of grown to where you are. So really appreciate you having you on.
Yeah, it means a lot, man. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you go check out Jamin Hunter in the description below. Make sure you go subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's got some awesome content. Amazing dude, amazing wildlife photographer. And make sure you subscribe to Bird Burger. And I will see you guys in the next episode.